cart in order to display the quantity. So we need to share the cart with the orders page first. We'll go to our files and open app.jsx, and we'll scroll down. And here we'll share the cart with the orders page using a prop cart equals curly brackets, and we'll save the cart and save. And we'll open the orders page again. And at the top, we're going to access the prop using curly brackets and cart. And we're going to pass this cart into the header using cart equals curly brackets and the cart. Let's save. And we'll open the website. And we're going to go to the orders page. So first we'll click here to go to the home page. And then we'll click here to open the orders page. And it should be working. So now we're going to generate this HTML using data from the backend. So we'll go back to the orders page. And at the top, we're going to import what we need. So first we'll import Axios from Axios. And we'll also import curly brackets, use state, and use effect from React. And now down here, first we'll create some state to save the orders using const square brackets equals use state and brackets. And we'll call this data the orders, comma, and the updater function set orders. And at the start, we'll set the orders to an empty array. And below this, we're going to make a request to the backend using use effect brackets and a function brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. And down here, we'll give it a empty array so that it only runs once. And inside, we're going to use axios.get again. So brackets, and the URL path for the orders is /API/orders. And then we'll do .then to wait for the response from the backend. We'll give this a function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. Inside this parameter is the response from the backend. And once we get the response, we're going to save it inside orders using set orders, brackets, response.data. Let's save. And now we can check the network tab to see if we got the orders. We'll open the console. Inside the network tab, we can refresh and remove this and search for orders. And down here, we'll click this request and go to the response tab. And the backend gave us the orders that we need to display. Now, a problem here is that we only have the product ID in the order, but we also need to display some product details on the website. And again, the backend supports an expand parameter for this URL path. So at the end here, we'll add $expand equals products. This time, make sure you have an S at the end. So now let's save and check the network tab again. And we'll refresh. And now inside the orders request, you'll see that each order has the product ID, but it also has the other data for the product. And this is what we need to display on the website. So now we'll go into our code and we're going to generate the HTML. So first we'll press Control or Command F, and we're going to search for order-container, which is down here. And we can collapse this code and collapse the other order container. Each of these represents an order on the website. So we're going to generate this HTML. At the top, we'll insert and we'll run orders.map brackets, and we'll give it a function. And this parameter is going to be each order. And for each order, we're going to return some HTML. So we want each order to be converted into this HTML. We're going to select it and copy it. Inside here, we'll paste, press Control or Command Shift P, and run format document and we'll scroll back up. As always, we need a key prop when we're looping through an array. We'll set the key equals, and each order has an order.id property. As usual, we're going to replace the values in here. Feel free to pause if you want to try it yourself first. So for the delivery date, we're going to insert, and we're going to use day.js brackets, and each order has an order.orderTimeMS. And outside this bracket, we'll use .format, brackets, and a string. And to display the date, we're going to use 4 capital M's for the month and a capital D for the date. So now we also need to import day.js. So we'll scroll to the top, and at the top we'll import day.js from a string day.js. And let's also import format money because we're going to use it later. So import curly brackets format money from a string /utils/money. Now we're going to scroll back down, and we're going to replace the total order cost. So here we're going to remove this, and curly brackets, we're going to insert format money brackets and give it the order.total cost cents. We'll scroll down, and here we're going to replace this with the order ID. So curly brackets, order.id. Next, inside this element order details grid, this displays the list of products in the order. And we're going to generate this using React as well. So above this, we're going to use curly brackets, and we're going to get the order.products array, and we're going to loop through it using .map brackets and give it a function and save each product. And for each product, we're going to return brackets some HTML. So if we collapse this code and collapse this element and this element, and we also collapse these. So 3 of these elements represents one product. It's a little different because we don't have an element that contains all of these because we're using a grid here, but it works in a similar way. We're going to copy this code, and inside return, we're going to paste. And the one difference here is that if we scroll up, we're returning multiple elements from this function. So we need to wrap these in a fragment. So at the top, we'll type less than, greater than. But then we have another problem here, which is, remember when we loop through an array, each element that we return should have a key property. And we can't add props to fragments like this. To solve this, we need to use the full fragment syntax. So we're going to scroll to the top, and for React, we're going to import, using comma, the fragment component. So we'll scroll back down, and in here, we're going to use the full fragment syntax and remove this. So this does the same thing, except now we can add a key prop to it, equals curly brackets, and let's set the prop to the product.id. And we'll scroll to the bottom, and before these brackets, remember to add the closing fragment tag. And finally, we'll press Control or Command-Shift-P and format document. And now we can replace this default code that we have down here. Finally, we're going to replace each product's details. So here, we're going to replace the name and insert the product.name. And here, let's also replace the image, curly brackets, replace it with product.image. And actually, I made a mistake. I forgot that all the product details are saved in a property called product. So let's actually rename this to order product. And then here, we're going to do the order product.product.id and the order product.product.image and the order product.product.name. And then down here, to replace the delivery date, this is directly on the order product. So we can remove this and insert, and we'll use day.js and bracket and give it the order product dot estimated delivery time ms. And outside these brackets, we'll do dot format brackets and a string, and we'll use the format capital M 4 times for the month and capital D for the date. And then down here for the quantity, we're going to insert, and the quantity is directly on the order product dot quantity, and save. And now if we scroll down, we can also remove the rest of this default HTML and save this file. And now let's check our website, and everything should be working except we're generating the HTML for these orders using data from the backend. So now let's go back and we'll save this into Git. We'll open the Git section and we'll give it the message, generate the HTML for the orders page, and commit. Next, if we look at our code right now, you'll notice we have a lot of code in one file. To make our code cleaner, we should separate our code into smaller components. So let's go to our files, and we're going to start with the home page. So inside the home page, we're showing a grid of products. To make the code cleaner, we can separate this into its own component. So we'll go to the pages folder and we'll click it, and we're going to create a new file, and let's call it the products grid.jsx. And now we have multiple components that are related to the home page. So usually we organize this into a folder. So inside here, we're going to create a new folder, and we're going to call it home, and press enter. And we group all the components related to the home page inside here. So we'll move the homepage.jsx, and let's update the imports, and also homepage.css, and also the products grid. And whenever we move files, we need to make sure the imports are still correct. So in homepage, I'm going to scroll up, and we should make sure that we have 2 ... slashes in front, because now we're inside an additional folder. So that looks good to me. And we're also going to go to app.jsx and scroll up and make sure that the home page is now inside the home folder. So now let's save and check our website and go to the home page to make sure it still works. So now let's go back to our code, and we're going to separate the products grid into its own file. So in here, we'll create the component using export function products grid brackets and curly brackets, and we'll return some HTML. And we're just going to copy the HTML to here. So inside the homepage, we're going to scroll down to the products grid, and we can collapse this element and select all this code and copy inside the products grid. Inside here, we can paste and press Control or Command Shift P and format document. Now we'll scroll up and we're going to fix these errors. So first we need access to the products. So we can pass those in as a prop. Curly brackets, products. And down here, we also need the format money function. So at the top, we're going to import curly brackets, format money from a string, and we'll find that utils file. So we need to get out of 2 folders this time using // utils/money and save. And now inside the homepage, at the top, we're going to import our products grid. So import curly brackets, the products grid from a string, and it's right beside the home page. So we can just do /products grid. And then down here, we can remove this HTML and just use our component less than products grid / greater than. And we need to give it the products. So we'll create a prop products equals curly brackets, and we'll give it the products. So as you can see, this makes the code much cleaner when we separate it into smaller components. The last step is at the top, we can remove this format money function since we're not using it anymore. Let's save and let's open the website and make sure everything still works. So that looks good. Next, we're going to do the checkout page. So we'll go back to our code and we're going to open the checkout page and we're going to scroll to the top. And I'll leave separating the checkout header as an exercise. But we're going to scroll down here and we can move the order summary section into its own component. So inside the pages folder, I'm going to click it and create a new folder called checkout. Now, you might have already done this if you did the exercises from the previous lesson. But we're going to use this folder checkout, and I'm going to move the checkout page inside here and update the imports and also move the CSS files. And I'll make sure that the imports look good. So in here at the top, make sure there's 2 ... slashes in front, and inside app.jsx, make sure that there is a checkout folder in front of this component. So I'll go back to the checkout page and I'll create a new file. Let's call it the order summary.jsx. And we're going to create export function order summary brackets and curly brackets. And we're going to return brackets the HTML for the order summary. Inside the checkout page, we're going to scroll down and find the order summary. We can collapse it and select this code and copy. Inside the order summary, we'll paste and press Ctrl or Command-Shift-P and format document. And we'll scroll to the top. And we're going to need the delivery options and the cart inside here. So we're going to get this from the props using curly brackets, the cart, comma, and the delivery options. And we also need day.js and the format money function. So at the top, we'll also import day.js from day.js and import curly brackets format money from the string, and we'll find the utils file, which is /utils/money. And all the errors should now be gone. We'll save, and inside checkout page, we can remove this code, and we can use our new component, less than order summary / greater than, and we need to give it the cart equals curly brackets and save the cart, and we need to give it the delivery options equals curly brackets and give it the delivery options. And we need to import this at the top. So we'll scroll up, and here we can import curly brackets the order summary from a string ./order summary. And we don't need day.js anymore. So let's save and check the website, and everything still works. We'll go back and scroll down. And next, we can also move the payment summary into its own component. Feel free to pause the video if you want to try it yourself first. So inside the checkout folder, we'll click here and create a new file payment summary.jsx, and we'll create the component export function payment summary brackets and curly brackets, and we'll return the HTML. Inside the checkout page, we're going to collapse this element and select the HTML and copy. Inside the payment summary, we're going to paste, Control or Command Shift P, format document, and we're going to scroll back up, and we're going to get the payment summary from the props. So curly brackets, payment summary, and we need the format money function. So up here, import curly brackets, format money from a string, utils/money, and save. In the checkout page, we can remove this code and replace it with less than payment summary / greater than. And we need to give this the payment summary equals curly brackets and save the payment summary. And as you can see, our code is much cleaner now because we separated it into smaller components. So now we need to import this. So we're going to scroll to the top, and here we'll import curly brackets, the payment summary from a string /payment summary. And we don't need format money anymore. And save. Let's go back to the website, and everything is still working. We'll go back to our code, and we're going to go inside the order summary component. So in here, the code is still a little bit too complicated. So what we can do is we can find this element with the class delivery options, and we can separate this into its own component as well. Feel free to pause the video if you want to try this yourself first. So I'm going to go to the checkout folder and create a new file and name it delivery options.jsx. And we'll create a component export function delivery options brackets and curly brackets and return some HTML and back to the order summary. And here we can collapse this element and select it and copy. Inside delivery options, inside here, we can paste Control or Command Shift P and format document. And we'll scroll to the top. Here, we need to get the delivery options using the props, so curly brackets, delivery options. And we're going to import format money. So up here, we're going to import curly brackets, format money from a string /utils/money, and we also need day.js. So up here, we'll import day.js from a string day.js. And I think we also need another thing here, which is the cart item. So we're going to get this from the props as well. So up here, we're also going to get the cart item and save. And now in the order summary, we can replace all this code with our component less than delivery options / greater than. And we're going to give it the cart item equals curly brackets, save the cart item, and give it the delivery options equals curly brackets, save the delivery options. And we also need to import this. So at the top, we can import curly brackets, the delivery options from a string /delivery options and save. And let's check our website and make sure it still works. So that looks good to me. So if we go back to our code, you can see that our code is cleaner now after we separate this into another component. And remember, it's up to us how we want to separate our components. We can actually keep separating this into smaller components if we want. For example, we can also have a cart item details component or a delivery date component, but I'll leave these as exercises. I'm also going to leave the orders page as an exercise, but we can just get started on it. So here, inside the pages folder, we're going to create a new folder for the orders page. So orders, and we're going to move this component inside here and update the imports. And we're going to move this inside here as well. And just make sure the imports look okay. So in here, we'll scroll up, make sure that these two have two ... slashes in front. That looks good. And in app.jsx, make sure that the orders page is now inside an orders folder. So we'll save this and open the website. And we're going to click here to go to home and click here to go to orders. And the orders page should still be working. So I'll leave separating this as an exercise. We'll go back to our code and we'll save this into Git. Inside the Git section, we'll create the message separate into smaller components and commit. Next, we're going to go back to our files and we're going to go to our home page. And we're going to review async await. Async await is a feature of JavaScript, and it lets us write asynchronous code like normal code. Right now, we're using promises, which means we need to use .then to wait for this code to finish, and then run this function. With async await, we can actually write this like normal code. To do that, in front of Axios, we can type await and space. So this is going to wait for this code to finish, and then it's going to move on to the next line. And now, because we're waiting for this code to finish, we can actually save this result in a variable. So at the front, we can save it in const response equals await this code. And now we don't need to use .then anymore. And we can remove it. However, in order to use await, we need to be inside an async function. So in front of this function, we need to add async and space. As you can see, async await lets us write asynchronous code like normal code, or code that runs line by line. And async await makes the code easier to understand. So in React, it's recommended to use async await instead of promises when we can. However, in React, there is a small problem with using async await and useEffect. As a review, when we put async in front of a function, this function will now return a promise. That's because this function has some asynchronous code inside, or code that takes some time to finish. So that means that this entire function is going to take some time to finish. That's why it has to return a promise. Now the problem is the inner function in useEffect should not return a promise. It should only return nothing or a cleanup function like this. A cleanup function is useful if we want to do some cleanup when this component is removed. So because this inner function is now returning a promise, it's sort of breaking the rules of useEffect. To solve this, we usually create a new function inside useEffect, like const get home data equals, and create a new function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. And we're going to make this function async. And we'll leave this as an ordinary function. And now we're going to move our code inside here. So we'll cut it and paste it. And now because we're inside an async function, we can now use await. And it will also not mess up useEffect. At the end, we just need to run this function using get home data and brackets. So this gets the same data as before, but it uses async await. So remember, when using async await inside useEffect, we need to create a new function and then run the function. Otherwise, it will break the rules of useEffect. So let's save and check the home page and go to the home page, and everything still works. So let's go back, and we'll use async await in the app component where we get the cart. So here, feel free to pause if you want to try it yourself first. We'll create a new function using const. Let's call it fetch app data equals a function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. And we'll move this code into the function. So we'll cut and paste. And we'll select this and press tab. In front of the function, we'll use async. And now we can use await inside. So in front of Axios, we'll type await to wait for this to finish. And then we're going to save the result in a variable. Const response equals this result. And now we can remove .then and these brackets. And the code is much cleaner. Finally, we're going to run this function, fetch app data and brackets, and save. And let's do the same thing in the checkout page. So we'll go to the checkout page here. Feel free to pause if you want to try it yourself. Const fetch checkout data equals brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. And we'll move this code inside, cut, and in here, paste, and select these lines and press tab. And we're going to turn this into an async function so we can use await inside. So in front of this request, we're going to await, and we're going to save it in a variable let response equals. So we're going to use let because we have two requests here, and we might want to reuse this variable. And I'll add a new line to make it a little easier to read. And now we can remove .then. And then down here, we'll also use await to wait for this to finish. And we're going to save the result inside response equals. And now we can remove .then. And the last step is to run this function. So fetch checkout data and brackets and save. We'll open the website, make sure the home page is working, and then go to the checkout page and make sure this is still working. So that looks good to me. We'll go back to our code, and that's async await. It lets us write asynchronous code like normal code. I'll leave converting the orders page to async await as an exercise. So now we can save this into Git. We'll give it the message, convert home and checkout to async await and commit. In the next lesson, we're going to learn data mutation, which means instead of just getting data from the backend, we'll update data in the backend, and we'll be able to add products to our cart and create orders. And that's the end of this lesson. In this lesson, we reviewed backend, which manages the data for a website. We set up a backend for our project. We learned how to fetch data or get data from the backend. We learned Axios, which is an easier way to make requests to the backend. We learned how to generate the HTML using the data from the backend. We separated our pages into smaller components, and we learned async await, which lets us write asynchronous code like normal code. Here are some exercises to help you practice what we learned in this lesson. In this lesson, we're going to learn data mutation, and we're going to make the website interactive. Data mutation means we update data in the backend. If we open the website, and I'll close some of these other tabs. If we go to the home page, notice that right now we can only view the data. If we try to update this data, like we try to add to cart, it doesn't do anything. So we're going to make this add to cart button work. We'll go to our code, and we're going to find the add to cart button. So I'll open my files, and I'm going to go to the home page, and we're going to open the products grid. And we're going to scroll down in this file to this add to cart button. The first step is to make this button interactive. So at the end, we're going to add an onClick attribute equals curly brackets and give this a function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. As a review, onClick is called an event handler. When we click this button, it will run this function. Now inside here, we're going to add the product to the cart. So we could try to update the cart here in React, but then we have to figure out where to save the cart. Instead, in the real world, we use the backend to update the cart and to save the cart. The advantage of using the backend is it will simplify our React code, and we can share the data in the backend. So if we access this website from another computer, we can access the updated cart using the backend. So here, to use the backend to add a product to the cart, we're just going to make another request to the backend. We're going to go to the top, and at the top, we're going to import Axios so that we can make another request. And we'll scroll back down. And when we click this button, we're going to make a request to the backend using Axios. And this time we're going to use .post and brackets. So previously we used Axios.get to get data from the backend. Post is a different type of request. .post is used to create data in the backend. In this case, we are adding a product to the backend. So we're creating a new cart item. That's why we use .post. Inside here, we're going to give it a URL path /API/cart-items. So notice this is the same URL path that we used to get the cart, but when we use post, the backend will behave differently. This will create a cart item instead of getting the cart items. Next, we need to tell the backend which product to add to the cart. To do that, we can give Axios.post another value, which is an object. When we use post, we can also send information to the backend using an object, and this is called the request body. Now, the backend needs to know two things in order to add a product to the cart. First, it needs to know the product ID that we want to add. In this case, this button is for, if we scroll up, the button is for this product right here. So at the bottom, we're going to tell the backend we want to add this product.id to the cart. And we also need another information, which is the quantity that we want to add. For now, let's just use the quantity 1. So this code will send a request to the backend, telling it to add this product to the cart with a quantity of 1. So now let's save this file, and then we'll go to the website, and we're going to go to this t-shirt product, and we're going to click Add to Cart. And then we're going to refresh the page. And now, if we look at the cart here, we have one more product. The quantity is 4. If we open the cart and we scroll to the bottom, notice that it added the t-shirt to the cart. So that's how we do data mutation or update data in the backend. We just send a request to the backend, and the backend takes care of updating and saving the data. So in the real world, we use the backend to manage and update the data. Next, notice that when we added this product to the cart, we had to refresh the page to see the new cart. It would be better if we could just reload the cart and update the page without needing to refresh. We'll go to our code, and at the bottom, we're going to go to app.jsx. So here, this code reloads the cart from the backend, and it updates the state. After it updates the state, React will update the page. So when we add a product to the cart, we just need to rerun this code, and it will update the page. And then we don't have to refresh the page every time. We're going to select this entire function, and we'll cut, and outside the use effect, we're going to paste it. And now that it's outside the use effect, we can share this function with our components. Now, let's actually rename this function to something more accurate, like load cart. And in here, load cart. And now we can share this with our components using a prop. So we're going to scroll down here, and in the home page, we're going to give it the prop load cart equals curly brackets, and we'll give it the function load cart and save. And now if we go to the home page, at the top, we'll get load cart out of the props and then give it to the products grid component. So remember, this component contains the add to cart button. So in here, we'll give it another prop, load cart equals curly brackets, and give it the load cart function and save. And now inside the products grid, at the top, we're going to get load cart out of the props. And then if we scroll back down, after we update the cart, we're going to call the function load cart. So this means we will update the cart in the backend, and then we'll get the new cart and update the page without needing to refresh. One other thing we have to do here is, remember, Axios.post contacts the backend. So this is asynchronous code. It does not finish right away. That means we need to wait for this code to finish before going on to the next line. To wait for this to finish, at the front of this code, we can type await and space. And remember, in order to use await, we need to be inside an async function. So we'll add async. And also, this code is not inside a use effect. So we can just use async directly here, like this. After that, load cart is also asynchronous. So it's a good idea to await this code as well to be consistent. So now let's save, and we'll check the website. And first we'll go back to the home page. And this time, let's click add to cart on